Hello and happy this hour. It's another day. It's another opportunity our loving and merciful Father has given us for us to continue sharing and for us to continue understanding His plan upon humanity and why it is a must that a man must be born again. I am your host, Teacher Sarah. This is our program, Line Upon Line. And I believe that as we continue sharing whatever I'm sharing with you, you are getting well grounded in the truth and in the knowledge of Christ. We are in our series, Unless a Man is Born Again, with the intention of helping each and every one of us to understand why salvation is only by believing in this one man, Jesus Christ, who is the seed of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, and the seed of David. Last time, we were able to see more in the story of the descendants of Jacob, who are they, and how Jacob had his 12 sons. We were able to see that Jacob had the 12 sons through 4 different women, and that is his 2 wives, Leah and Rachel, who are sisters, and also through their maid servants. And it's very amazing, because if God was looking into the manners of how one is, then Jacob could not qualify. But God is so merciful, and God is just interested in the seed. And we went all the way back from Genesis so that we can be able to understand where Jesus is coming from and how it all started since the fall of man. Today, I want us to look into this special story, the story of Joseph, who was the son of Jacob. And he is this one son who Jacob loved most. We are told that his father Jacob had made for him a tunic of many colors. And in the story of Joseph, I'll just give you the story for today so that next time we'll be able to now start getting into some details so that we can be able to look into what God promised about salvation all the way from the time of Abraham until the time Jesus is coming and suffering and dying on the cross. The story of Joseph is well narrated in details from the 37th chapter of the book of Genesis. And we are told that Jacob dwelt in the land where his father was a stranger, in the land of Canaan. I want you to notice this and to understand this, that despite Abraham, Isaac, and now Jacob dwelling in the land of Canaan, the land was not theirs. Since God took Abraham from the land of Ur and brought him to the land of Canaan, the land was not theirs. But God had promised Abraham that I shall give this land to your descendants. Okay? And after that, in chapter 37, we are told that even Jacob, who was the grandson of Abraham, he dwelt in the land where his father was a stranger in the land of Canaan. And this is the history of Jacob. We are told that Joseph, being 17 years old, was feeding the flocks with his brothers. And the land was with the sons of Bilhah and the sons of Zilpah, his father's wives. And Joseph brought a bad report of them to his father. Now you can see what kind of a boy he was. He could go to feed the flocks of his father with the brothers, and the only thing he could do, he could bring bad reports. Now, I believe this is why the brothers hated. Now, Israel loved Joseph more than all his children because he was the son of his old age. Also, he made him a tunic of many colors. But when his brothers saw that their father loved him more than all his brothers, they hated him and could not speak peaceably to him. Now, the source of the conflict between Joseph and his brothers, number one, he could go out there and bring bad reports. And number two, he is the son whom the father loved so much. And the story continues that one time Joseph had a dream. And we have been told that he was 17 years old, so he was a big boy, he was a grown-up. So Joseph had a dream and he told it to his brothers, and they hated him even more. So he said to them, "Please hear this dream which I have dreamed. There we were binding sheaves in the field. Then behold, my sheaf arose and also stood upright. And indeed your sheaves stood all around and bowed down to my sheaf." And his brother said to him, "Shall you indeed reign over us?" It's just a dream. The boy just have a dream and he's narrating the dream to the brothers. And the brothers are like, now you want to tell us that we shall bow down to you. Or shall you indeed have dominion over us? So they hated him even more for his dream and for his words. In verse 9 of chapter 37 we are told, "Then he dreamed still another dream and told it to his brothers and said, Look, I have dreamed another dream. And this time the suns, the moon, and the 11 stars bowed down to me." So he told it to his father and his brother. And his father this time around told the boy, "What is this dream that you have dreamed? Shall your mother and I and your brothers indeed come to bow down to the earth before you?" And his brothers envied him. Get the story? The brothers envied him, but his father kept the matter in mind. That is the story of Joseph. And now the story continued about Joseph on how he went to check on his brothers. And because of the hatred they had toward this boy, they planned on how to eliminate the boy. But Akri, one of the brothers, advised the other brothers, "Let us not kill our brother, let us sell him." Because we are told that there was some men who were passing and they bought Joseph as a slave, and these men took Joseph, who is a son of Jacob, a descendant of Isaac, who is a descendant of Abraham, into the land of Egypt. And now the story continues because it's just a story. And in chapter 39, we are given the story of Joseph being taken down to Egypt, and Potiphar, an officer of Pharaoh, captain of the guard, an Egyptian, bought him from the Ishmaelite who had taken him down there. So Joseph has already been sold by the brothers, and the Ishmaelites who had brought him have come to sell him now to Egypt. And now Potiphar, who was one of the officers of Pharaoh, bought this young man. And we are told that the Lord was with Joseph, and he was a successful man, and he was in the house of his master, the Egyptian. Now, Joseph is sold as a slave. But God made him to be accepted before the master, who was an Egyptian. And his master saw that the Lord was with him, and that the Lord made all he did to prosper in his hand. So Joseph found favor in his sight and served him. We are told that he made him overseer of his house, and all that he had he put under his authority. And so it was from the time that he had made him overseer of his house and all that he had, that the Lord blessed the Egyptian's house for Joseph's sake, and the blessing of the Lord was on all that he had in the house and in the field. Now, after Joseph was sold by the brothers in the land as a slave to the Ishmaelite, and he was again sold to the Egyptians as a slave, God was with him. And as he was serving his master in the land of Egypt, whatever he touched prospered. And so he had much favor. And he was made an overseer over all the household of Pharaoh. And it came this one time, we are told about how the wife aliangalia Joseph hivi akamtamani. And because Joseph could not give in, we are told that the woman gave a bad report about Joseph, and Joseph was thrown into prison. Remember, he was sold as a slave. When he was brought into the land of Egypt, he did not become a prisoner immediately. It was after some time, and he found himself in a prison because the king's wife wanted him, but he refused. And in the prison, in chapter 40 of the book of Genesis, we are given the story of Joseph interpreting dreams for some of the workers who had different dreams, and Joseph interpreted the dreams for them. And it was exactly as he interpreted the dreams that it came to be. And now, Joseph was still in the prison, and we are told in verse 20 of chapter 40 that it came to pass on the third day, which was Pharaoh's birthday, that he made a feast for all his servants, and he lifted up the head of the chief butler and the chief baker among his servants. Then he restored the chief butler to his butlership again, and he placed the cup in Pharaoh's hand, but he hanged the chief baker, and Joseph had interpreted to them. Yet the chief butler did not remember Joseph, but forgot him. Now it came to pass, after whatever these two guys had dreamed, it came to be fulfilled just as Joseph had interpreted. But we are told that this chief butler did not remember Joseph, but he forgot him. And it came to pass at the end of 2 full years. 2 full years came to pass. Joseph kama amesahaurika and he is in the prison, that Pharaoh had a dream, and behold, he stood by the river. Suddenly there came up out of the river 7 cows, fine looking and fat, and they fed in the middle. Then behold, 7 other cows came up after them out of the river, ugly and ground, and stood by the other cows on the bank of the river. Verse 4, we are told, and the ugly and ground cows ate up the 7 fine looking and fat cows. So Pharaoh awoke. Ameota ndoto. Ng'ombe wanono wametokea, and then other wanakaa vivi. And he woke from the sleep, and I know he was just shocked by what he saw. Ng'ombe ambao ni wakonde, ambao hawana sura, wakikula hawa ambao wako sawa. Na akaamka akiwa na hofu sana, and he could not understand the dream, and he was so much troubled, and he sought to get the interpretation of the dream. At this time now, this chief butler came to remember Joseph, and he told the king that there was a man, the time I was in prison, there was a man who interpreted a dream, my dream and another guy's dream, and this dream came to be as he interpreted. And so Pharaoh sent for Joseph. And we are told in the same chapter 41, from verse 7, so the advice was good in the eyes of Pharaoh and in the eyes of all his servants. And Pharaoh said to his servant, can we find such a one as this man in whom is the Spirit of God? And Pharaoh said to Joseph, inasmuch as God has shown you all this, there is no one as discerning and wise as you. You shall be over my house, and all my people shall be ruled according to your word. Only in regard to the throne will I be greater than you. Now Joseph amekuja na ameinterpret the dream for the king. Na ameambia king that the 7 fat cows zenye uliona, they represent 7 years of bountiful in the land, and the other 7 years that were weak and all that, they represent 7 years of drought. And so he gave the king an advice of how they are going to store up enough food for them for the 7 years when there shall be drought. And the king was so much impressed by Joseph, And now at this time, Joseph anatolewa kwa prison and he is given a higher position. And now, time came and time passed. The 7 years zikaisha and the time for the famine came. Remember, Joseph has already been sold. The brothers, I think they have even forgotten. We are told that Jacob, now their father, sent the brothers to the land of Egypt to go and look for food. And interestingly, the brothers went and they carried money with them. For your information, Jacob was not a beggar. Jacob was a rich guy. And so he sent his sons with enough money to buy food for them, rest they die uko kwao, Canaan. And remember, they are still in Canaan, a land that is not theirs. And we are told that when the brothers went to Egypt, they met Joseph, and Joseph recognized them. And he decided to play a game with them. And he requested that if they are not spies in the land, because he said, these men are spies. And they said, no, we are not spies, but we have come in good heart to buy food. Indeed, all of us, we are sons of one father. And we have left our father with the younger one. And the other one died. And if you don't believe us, we are of one family. And we are told that Joseph knew that these were his brothers, and so he inquired about the father and all that. But he decided to make sure that even the younger brother comes. And the story continues in chapter 42 and chapter 43 and chapter 44. It's a very interesting story. That one you will read at your own time. And in chapter 45, I want to read something here. We are told that then Joseph could not restrain himself before all those who stood by him. And he cried out, make everyone go out from me. So no one stood with him while Joseph made himself known to his brothers. Now, this time round, the first time he has given them food, they have gone. And he has told them, go and bring the younger brother so that I can know that you people, you are not spies. And when the other brothers went to meet their father Jacob back in Canaan, they told him of this ruler mwenye walipata Egypt, what amewaambia. And they told their father that we are to take our younger brother to him so that he can know that indeed we are brothers of one man. And the father was so much furious, and he told them, Joseph is dead. Now you want to take this other young man, that is Benjamin. Remember, Benjamin and Joseph were brothers. They were the sons of Rachel, the woman that Jacob loved. And he told the brothers, if now this one goes and die, I will be a finished man. This is my boy, because the other one got killed. And the brother promised the father that I will bring him back to you. And when they all came to him, Joseph decided to reveal himself to his brothers. And in verse 3 of chapter 45, we are told, then Joseph said to his brothers, I am Joseph. Does my father still live? But his brothers could not answer him, for they were dismayed in his presence. And Joseph said to his brothers, please come near to me. So they came near. Then he said, I am Joseph, your brother, whom you sold into Egypt. But now do not therefore be grieved or angry with yourselves because you sold me here. For God sent me before you to preserve life. For these 2 years of famine has been in the land, and there are still 5 in which there will be neither plowing or harvesting. And God sent me before you to preserve a prosperity for you in the earth, and to save your lives by a great deliverance. So now it was not you who sent me here, but God, and he has made me a father to Pharaoh, and a lord of all his house, and a ruler throughout all the land of Egypt. So in verse 9 he told them, hurry and go up to my father and say to him, thus says your son Joseph, God has made me lord of all Egypt. Come down to me, do not tarry. So you shall dwell in the land of Goshen, and you shall be nearer to me, you and your children, children's, your flocks and your herds. And it was so that the brothers went home, and they brought their father Jacob. We are told in chapter 46 that, so Israel took his journey with all he had and came to Beersheba and offered sacrifice to the God of his father Isaac. Then God spoke to Israel in the vision of the night and said, Jacob, Jacob. And he said, here I am. So he said, I am God, the God of your father. Do not fear to go down to Egypt, for I will make you a great nation there. Now, God promised Abraham that I will make you a great nation. And in the promise, God told Abraham that in your seed, who is Isaac, I will multiply you. Okay, sawa. Then Isaac gets two sons, Esau and Jacob. Now, Jacob now have 12 sons. Remember, God had promised Abraham that I will multiply you. The same he promised to Isaac, the same he has promised to Jacob. Now, when Jacob is on his way to Egypt, in a place called Beersheba, God speaks to him and he tells him that do not fear, I am God, the God of your father. Do not fear to go down to Egypt, for I will make you a great nation there. Where? In the land of Egypt. And I will go down with you to Egypt and will also surely bring you up again. And Joseph will put his hands on your eyes. In short, akaambiwa utaenda utakufia huko, but I bring your descendants out of there. Then Jacob went with all that he had into the land of Egypt. And in verse 28 we are told, then they settled in a place. Verse 29, so Joseph made ready his chariot and went up to Goshen to meet his father Israel. And he presented himself to him and fell on his neck and wept on the neck for a good while. And Israel said to Joseph, now let me die, since I have seen your face, because you are still alive. And that is how Jacob and all his sons found themselves in the land of Egypt. This is a land that is not theirs. We can go back to the time of Abraham. In chapter 15, when God promised Abraham that he could give him the land, God told Abraham that for sure your descendants shall be strangers in a land that is not theirs for 400 years. 400 years, your descendants shall be strangers in a land that is not theirs, and also they shall be enslaved. That is God's promise to Abraham when he was telling him that he is going to multiply him. And now, in chapter 47, remember Joseph had told his brothers that the famine haishi. In fact, in 2 years, there are 5 more years to go. And so they dwelt in the land of Goshen, and they dwelt there, Jacob and the other sons. But remember, Joseph was serving in the palace. And so he was working there, and of course he could see his relatives. And the story continues now about the life of Jacob in the land of Egypt. And Jacob died there, and they took his bones to go and bury him wherever he was to be buried, where the father was buried also. And Joseph, because he continued dwelling in that land with his brothers, he told his brothers that when the time comes for you to get out of this land, do not leave behind my bones. Because Joseph knew that it is God who had taken him into the land of Egypt so that his people can come later and they dwell in the land and prosper there. And so the book of Genesis ends with the story of the death of Joseph, how Joseph died. Maybe to read the last verses of the book of Genesis, it says, "So Joseph dwelt in Egypt, he and his father's household, and Joseph lived 110 years. Joseph saw Ephraim's children to the third generation. The children of Machir, the son of Manasseh, were also brought up on Joseph's knees. And Joseph said to his brethren, I am dying, but God will surely visit you and bring you out of this land to the land of which he swore to Abraham, to Isaac, and to Jacob." So in short, anawambia, guys, this is not our land. For me, I am dying, and this is not our land. But I know that the God of our fathers, the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, will surely take you out of this land. And he will take you to the land that he promised our fathers. And in verse 25, we are told, "Then Joseph took an oath from the children of Israel, saying, God will surely visit you, and you shall carry up my bones from here." So Joseph died being 110 years old, and they embalmed him, and he was put in a coffin in Egypt. Now, the book of Genesis ends with that story, with the death of Joseph. Now, there is one thing I want you to notice here. Though they are in a land that is not theirs, the children of Jacob are not in slavery. They are not in this time when they are enslaved with hard labor by the Egyptians. Though Joseph was sold as a slave there, and he served the Egyptians, or the house of the Egyptians, but the other family, Jacob, they were not yet enslaved, even to the time Joseph is coming to die. And so when we get into the book of Exodus, we are getting into a different story. Now, after the descendants of Jacob wameingia in the land of Egypt. Now, the book of Exodus starts with a very nice analogy of those who got into the land of Egypt. And we are told from verse 1, "Now these are the names of the children of Israel who came to the land of Egypt, each man and his household who came with Jacob." We are told that they were Reuben, Simeon, Levi, Judah, Issachar, Zebulun, Benjamin, Dan, Naphtali, Gad, and Asher. All those who are descendants of Jacob were 70 persons. This is very crucial for you to understand, that the number of those who are of the household of Jacob who made it into the land of Egypt, they were 70 persons. And we are told that in verse 7, in verse 5, "And those who were descendants of Jacob were 70 persons, for Joseph was in Egypt already. And Joseph died, and his brothers and all that generation." So Joseph amefariki na hiyo generation yake yote wamego. "But the children of Israel were fruitful and increased abundantly, multiplied and grew exceedingly mighty, and the land was filled with them." It's interesting. They have come in 70 persons, and these people have continued to multiply. Remember the promise of God. He told Abraham, he told Isaac, he told Jacob that I will multiply, that you will increase. But where were they going to increase? God akawachorea, and God decided to go and hide them somewhere so that they can multiply. I want us to read something that David said in Psalms 105. It's very interesting that David and acknowledge that these people went into the land of Egypt because God had a plan for them. Remember, the place they were dwelling previously, it's the land of Canaan, and it was not their land. And it is the land that God had promised that he would give them. But now a famine has come in, and they have shifted from the land of Canaan, and now they are in the land of Egypt. And David, talking of how God had preserved them in Psalms 107, this is what David says. I don't want to read the whole of this chapter, but the whole of the chapter narrate what happened in the lives of these people when they were in the land of Egypt. But I want to read verse 17. David narrates this story, and he shows how God is merciful and how God is faithful, using the story of how God had dealt with their forefathers, how he took them to Egypt and brought them out of Egypt in a mighty hand. And he starts the psalm by saying, "Give thanks to the Lord, call upon his name, make known his deeds among the people." And he says, "Sing," and all that. I want us to read from verse 7. He says, "He is the Lord our God, his judgment are in all the earth. He remembers his covenant forever, the word which he commanded for 1,000 generations, the covenant which he made with Abraham, an oath to Isaac, and confirmed it to Jacob for a statute, to Israel as an everlasting covenant, saying, to you I will give the land of Canaan as the allotment of your inheritance, when they were few in number, indeed very few, and strangers in it." Imagine, God has brought these guys into a land that is occupied. The Canaanites, the Perizzites, the hizo zote wameoccupy a land, and then God amewaleta huko na amewambia, "I will give you this land." And so David is acknowledging how God fulfilled his covenant. Verse 13, he says, "When they went from one nation to another, from one kingdom to another people, he permitted no one to do them wrong. Yes, he rebuked kings for their sakes." You remember the story of Abraham with Abimelech, with Pharaoh, but God rebuked the kings for their sake, saying, "Do not touch my anointed ones, and do my prophets no harm." Now, this verse has been wrongly misquoted for too long. When David was saying this, that do not touch my anointed one, it's not about us. Please read the story. David is quoting of how God protected their fathers, Isaac, Jacob, how God protected them in a land that is not theirs, how God spoke about Abraham. Remember, this time he lied to the king about Sarah, but God rebuked the king, and he tells the king, "He's my prophet. Though he lied to you, he's my prophet." So this is not a verse to talk about anybody in our generation. Let this verse not be misquoted again. So verse 15 saying, "Do not touch my anointed ones, and do my prophet no harm." Moreover, he called for a famine in the land. He destroyed all their provision of bread. Verse 17, this is David saying, "He sent a man before them, Joseph, who was sold as a slave. They had his feet with fetters. He was laid in irons until the time that his word came to pass. The word of the Lord tested him. The king sent and released him. The rulers of the people let him go free. He made him lord of his house and ruler of all his possessions, to bind the princes at his pressure and teach his elders wisdom." And the story continued of how Israel came into Egypt and Jacob dwelt in the land of Ham. You remember the story of the sons of Noah. That is Shem, Ham, and Japheth. So the land of Egypt is the land of Ham, the Hamites, the black people, those who were cast by Noah. And in verse, I want us to read these last verses. That is verse 42. Verse 42 he says, for he remembered his holy promise. Now it is after he has narrated how God saved his people, and he says, he remembered his holy promise and Abraham his servant. He brought out his people with joy, his chosen ones with gladness. He gave them the land of the Gentiles, and they inherited the labor of the nations, that they might observe his statutes and keep him. In short, it is God in his plan who took Joseph in the land of Egypt so that these people can have a safe ground for them to multiply. And now when we are getting into the book of Genesis, we are given a short analogy of the number of persons who got into the land, and it is after the death of Joseph, we are told, there arose another Pharaoh who did not know what Joseph had done to his people. And this is the Pharaoh who proposed that these guys be enslaved. And they were enslaved, and they were afflicted during the days of Moses, and that is when Moses is being born, and there is this order that these guys are multiplying too much. They have filled all over, so let us put an end to them. And the king gave an order that for every boy child be killed, and that is how Moses alienda kafichwa, and Pharaoh's daughter took Moses and raised him as his son in the king's house. But it came a time Moses grew up, and he could see how his brothers were being afflicted, and he could not take it. And one time we have the story of how he confronted one of the Egyptians when he was dealing wrongly with the Egyptians. And Moses, after killing the Egyptian, had to flee. And he freed in the land of the Midianites. And that is where now Moses stayed for another 40 years. Remember, amezaliwa wakati wameanza kuwa enslaved, ama wakati wanakuwa enslaved, wakati wako in slavery now. The whole house of Israel wako in slavery when Moses is being born. And 40 years amekaa huko, ameua Muegypti, ametorokea in the land of the Midianites, and there he goes, he marries Zipporah, and they have children. But at the age of 80, Moses have an encounter with God in the burning bush. Remember now, for 80 good years, the descendants of Jacob, the descendants of Israel, the Israelites, they are enslaved. They are slaves in the land of Egypt. And the next time we shall continue from there. We shall see into how God spoke to Moses to deliver these people from the land of Egypt, to bring them into the land that he had promised their fathers. But remember, God had told Abraham that your descendants shall surely be sojourners. They shall be strangers in a land that is not theirs. That is from the time that God is speaking to Abraham to the time that God is coming to bring them out of this land. There is quite a good time ambayo inapita hapo. But remember, the totality of their enslavement in Egypt starts when Joseph dies. Though Joseph was sold as a slave, but the enslavement of the other brothers started after his death. And we shall continue from there. I really appreciate to know that you are following up and you are learning. And thank you for those who are asking questions. And I believe that you are getting more clarity. I realized that most of us, we don't have the details of the story in the Bible. And this has caused many of us to have gaps. Na hata wakati tunaelezea mambo ya wokovu, it's like ni kitu imetokezea tu pahali tu katikati hivi na ika happen. But it's a journey and it's a good plan. And it is in understanding this that we are able to understand the depth of God's love towards mankind. God planned it, and it is God who executed it to its end. And so it's good even to understand some of these things. It's a journey, but by the end of it all, you will come to understand why. If it is not in believing in this one man, Jesus Christ, no man can be born again. Until next time, you enjoy your time and kindly read your Bible. You know, we have this mentality that these are just stories. No, they are there with a purpose. If you don't see the big picture in the story, you will miss it. So kindly have your Bible, be reading your Bible, so that even when we are sharing, when we are witnessing about God's plan for humanity, we shall have a clarity. You know, most people think that the story of salvation starts with the death of Jesus. No, the plan of salvation does not start there. Even it does not start at his birth. The plan of salvation started long ago. And the only way you can understand God's plan is when we read the whole Bible. And so kindly have your Bible, kindly be reading your Bible, and kindly seek to understand that which God planned and that has already been fulfilled. Otherwise, I wish you all the best, for you are the blessed of God, and we shall meet next time.